Carl, I've been labeled a doom and gloomer, and and I try to be objective with everything and look at where we are. And I'll tell you, that's why I'm glad you turned around and came back on again, because it wasn't that long ago that we spoke. But what's been resonating with me, and for people listening, I'm going to be talking about this in a lot of my episodes this week because I think it's very important. And I sent you the video of Howard Lutnick on the All In podcast last week, who actually a friend of mine reached out to me and said, "Hey, you got to watch this."
Right.
And you watched it, and let's start with what your thoughts are, and overall.
Well, well, let's start with the hive mind, okay? Because it's Monday, right? And Friday, I every Friday I'm on a show out of Chicago in the second hour called Stocks and Jocks, and as the name implies, we talk about sports and stock market. And I said, I longer term, intermediate term, whatever have you, I've been bearish for 15 years and obviously wrong for the last five, right? Um, but if I look at this just from a technical perspective, just from a chart point of view, if we close approximately here today, which was Friday, um, if you're a trader, you buy the market on Monday. Now, that doesn't mean you buy and sit on it for the next 10 years. Okay. But, and the reason is that several of the things that I watch have said, well, we came way down. We did not penetrate these levels. And now these indicators have flipped around and they're positive. Well, if you short that sort of a circumstance, you're just throwing money away. I mean, if you don't believe in it, then just sit on the sidelines and just sit in cash. But you're out of your mind to be short of the market into a market that says it wants, that from all the indications going higher. Now, I don't know for how long, but there you are, right? Well, this morning, market, I'm in the car on my way up to go skiing. It's 5 o'clock in the effing morning. The futures are up 40 handles. I'm not going to chase that, but we end up 100. All right, maybe I should have. I mean, because it was S&P was up 100 points. But it was up, 35 when I woke up this morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm not chasing that crap. Up 40 points, you're out of your mind. Right? And yet, it was on an indicator that said that, yeah, you want to be in it, at the close on Friday. And so, any positive open was something that, based on that, you'd buy. But I'm not chasing something that's, 40 points up at the open. So I did nothing and, got in the car and drove. And I can't really trade while I'm driving anyway. I mean, I got to drive the car, right? But here's the thing is that you look at where things are right now and you look at the short-term view of stuff. Okay, because Lutnick's out there. Lutnick is not an idiot. Right? He's Cantor dude. Right? Cantor.
Did you know about him, Carl? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're familiar with him? Because I wasn't.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, and actually, I knew people that were involved with Cantor all the way back to 9/11. And I have somebody that I knew. I don't hang out with them anymore because I don't live there anymore, but very nearly escaped, just by the skin of their teeth, being in the wrong place at the wrong time and eating an airplane. Right. So, I mean, I have contacts in that industry because, I used to run an internet company. I was in Chicago. Cantor had a lot of representation, a lot of people that were there, as well as New York, because why? Well, Chicago's a money town, right? Just like New York is. So, yes, this is not a stupid man by any stretch of the imagination. And one of the things, so he pointed out a bunch of things about tariffs, but one of the things that he didn't say, and I don't quite understand. So I don't understand it, but at the same time, I do understand it. He comes from the private sector, not the government at all, right? I mean, that's what he does. That's their job. Cantor's a bond shop. And he says, well, look, tariffs are not inflationary. And he got the, you're Martian and you have 6 heads look from the guys that were interviewing him. But he's right. And I've said this for years. And I've posted it recently as well. Why not? Well, because what causes inflation is government deficit spending. That's the cause of inflation. So if you lever a tariff on something, the person that wants to buy that thing, that price goes up. So you'd say, well, that's inflation. Except for every dollar that gets spent by that person, $1 comes off the federal deficit because the tariff goes to the Treasury and offsets the deficit. So tariffs, from a monetary perspective, across the entire economy are exactly neutral every single time. They have to be mathematically. Well, it's mathematics, it's not politics. Now, where he didn't go was that second half of it. Okay, he said, no, they're not inflationary. Well, he's right, they're not. But the reason they're not inflationary is that. And he did explain that, of course, the tariffs go to the deficit. Okay, but he also said 2 other interesting things. One is that the External Revenue Service, okay, basically the Tariff Collection Bureau, if you will. But then he also, and he says, he thinks that's $1 trillion in revenue. But he's also quite sure that Elon can find $1 trillion worth of don't spend this in the federal budget. There's a problem there. And that is that we have to resolve this issue that we have in the federal government with the Impoundment Control Act, which was passed during after Nixon's time in office. It came out of the Nixon period of the presidency. For those who are not well steeped in history, Nixon, of course, was elected twice, right? And then he was impeached because of Watergate. And he resigned because, on the math, he knew that he was going to lose. That the House was going to vote to impeach him, and the Senate was going to convict him. And he was going to be thrown out of office. And he knew that that was the vote count. That's why he quit. Okay, you take a look at Trump. Trump was impeached twice. He knew the vote count was going to go the other way, that he was not going to be ejected, and therefore he didn't care. Right? Nixon knew that the vote count was going to go the wrong direction. Well, why was the vote count going to go the wrong direction? Well, supposedly because he orchestrated the Watergate break-in. That's illogical. That's not what happened. Why? Because Nixon had just won in a landslide. Why in the hell would he break into the Watergate Hotel when he was winning in a landslide? He wasn't losing the election. He didn't need to come up with a 900-pound bomb to blow up 3 days before the election in order to win. He was winning, and not by a little. It wasn't close. Then there's the backstory on the whole thing with Ford. His vice president was essentially forced off the ticket because of a tax problem. And Ford was given to him as the only possible person to replace him that the House and Senate would confirm. What's the backstory on that? This is not part of the history you learn in high school. Okay? But it's fact. None of all of the stuff relevant to that time makes any sense from the narrative. Now, the truth I have my own view of what was probably going on there. I don't know if I'm right, but the data is, the actual documents that have been released to either prove that I'm right or prove I'm wrong. But what everyone is taught is a lie. I just don't know exactly what the truth is, but it's a lie. And that I know for sure. Because nobody does stupid things if they're not stupid, and Nixon was not stupid. Okay. Now, the one dumb thing that he did was alter the tapes, tamper with them. If he had taken them out behind the White House and burned them, I suspect he would have survived the impeachment. If he would have destroyed them as opposed to screwing with them, I suspect he would have survived. If he would have just basically burned them and said, fuck you, I'm not turning them over because they're gone. If you want to impeach me on obstruction, go ahead and do that. You have no evidence. I destroyed the evidence. Okay. I think he would have gotten away with that, to be honest. But, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But here's the thing. Out of that, before, at the point, when all this was going on, this was during one of the roughest economic periods for America in American history. I lived through it as a child becoming an adult, okay, going into adolescence. People who are younger than myself have no memory of it. I'm 61. If you're 40 or younger, you weren't alive. If you're 50 or younger, you were a baby. Okay? So you have no recollection of what was going on with inflation and everything else. And one of the things that Nixon did was he impounded funds that Congress had appropriated to try to control the inflation. He knew damn well where it came from excess government spending, and he just refused to spend the money. Congress had appropriated this money, he refused to spend it. Well, after Nixon left office, the Impoundment Control Act was passed, which says the president doesn't have that power. Congress appropriates the money, it has to be spent. Now, if you think about how stupid this is, okay, but this is what we're dealing with Doji and Trump and trying to get this under control. This is the level of crazy. If Congress appropriates $1 billion to buy hammers for $10,000 apiece, and the specifications of the hammer are the same as a $40 hammer at Home Depot, the president has to spend the $1,000. He has to spend $1 billion. Even though he could spend $40 million instead and not spend the rest and get the same number of hammers. That's the fight. And the problem is that this is actual statute. This isn't policy. This isn't the law. So now we've got a fundamental friction here, okay? And where I think Lutnick's wrong and where he's got a problem is that the only way you can appeal to this and stop it is that fraud vitiates everything. I don't care what it is. Okay, you got all this screaming going on right now with people that, Trump's and Hegseth are throwing TDA people on planes and sending them to El Salvador, okay? And you got a judge that's saying you can't do that. They have a due process right. No, they don't. No, they don't. It's basic logic. To have a right, you must first acquire it in some lawful way. So if I sell you a car for $10,000, you now own the car, right, Mike?
Yes.
Unless I stole it. What happens if I stole the car?
I don't own it.
That's right. And as soon as the fact that it's stolen is discovered, what do you think the police are going to do?
Return the car to the rightful owner, and I'm shit out of luck at the money.
You're fucked. Okay, to be blunt. Right. It doesn't matter how much time's gone on. It makes no difference. You never possessed, you never had a legal right to own the vehicle. You never had it. You can't acquire it because it was stolen. So, and this is basic logic. So if you come into the United States illegally, you don't have due process rights. You never acquired them because you weren't here lawfully in the first place. You can't acquire something if you got it through fraud. If you come into the United States and say that you're here to study, you're a student, and your real reason for coming here is to agitate on the Israeli-Palestine issue, your visa is void. Now, I have to substantiate that that's what you did, but once I do that, your visa is void because you committed fraud when you got it. You never had a visa. I don't have to revoke it. It never existed. And this is the issue today. When you look at all the spending that's going on in healthcare, in all these other areas, all this stuff that Doji is supposedly going after, it's not unlawful because it's wasteful. It's unlawful because you never had a right to it in the first place because you stole it. It was fraudulent. And you never gain the right to anything, no matter how much time passes, when you commit a fraud. If I hold up a bank and I don't get caught for 10 years and I stole $10,000, the $10,000 is not mine. And it doesn't matter how long I get away with it. If I get caught 10 years later, I still don't get to keep the 10 grand. Because I never had it in the first place. It wasn't mine. And this is where we have to have a real come to Jesus kind of moment within this country. Virtually everything that is wrong from a federal fiscal perspective, from a government perspective, from a market perspective, traces back to this. All of it. Now, we add into that where Lutnick's right, which is that, so all these people that came into the United States illegally, several million of them during Biden's administration, they have no due process rights. And they cannot acquire them because they were never here lawfully in the first place. So they can be summarily deported, period. That's it. You do have to substantiate that they actually came into the United States illegally in the first place. But that's all. Once you reach that threshold, from a perspective of law, the question is settled. So let's say you do that. What does that do? Well, it decreases demand for housing because all those people had a place to live and now they don't. Okay? It increases demand for labor because all those people had jobs that Americans could have done and now they don't. Supply and demand is the basic law of economics. It is always true. So two things happen. Demand for all things that consumers use. Housing, transportation, food, energy, all these things. The demand falls because you take 10 million people, 15 million people, 20 million people, 5 million people, whatever the number is, and they leave. at the same time, the supply of labor falls. So what happens? The price goes up because there's less supply. So, you know, we've had this debate about this thing called a K-shaped economy, right? You heard about this? Supposedly K-shaped. Since 2008. The people on the top, they're making a hell of a lot of money, right? All the people on the bottom are getting screwed. What happens when you do this? And what happens to asset prices, which is where all these guys' money is? Would you mind telling me who, other than these guys, by the way, that's like the top 1% of Americans in income and assets, who else thinks this is bad, going from this to this?
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted, launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. The simplest and most affordable way to own physical gold and silver. Physical gold is the only asset outside of the control of the government and banking system. They can print dollars, but they can't print gold. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. Which he's shrinking, for people that are listening on the audio, he's shrinking, he's making it smaller. He's bringing the K down so the fingers are touching.
Right. So the people on the lower end pay less for the things that they need, and they get paid more. That's two goods, right? That's two benefits. Who gets it in the ass? The guys on the top that see their asset prices go to hell. You know why they don't want that to happen, right? Not very hard to figure out. But everybody else ought to want it to happen. Because, I mean, take a look at, just take one example. All right, just take one small example. Automobiles. We have, you know, what said, I saw something the other day that the average transaction price on a new car had reached $50,000. I have a 2015 Mazda. I bought it for cash in late 2014. It's a 2015 model year. It's a full-size sedan. I paid under 20 grand for it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the car. It's sitting in the parking lot right now. It's got my skis in the back of it. It's got 750,000 miles. Oh, no, not that many. 250,000 miles on it, 275,000. Not a single mechanical thing has been done to it other than ordinary maintenance. Why can't we have those cars today? Would you rather buy that, or would you rather buy something that costs 60 grand? By the way, other than putting tires and oil and batteries in that vehicle, I've done nothing to it. You know, ordinary maintenance. It's 10 years old. There's nothing wrong with it. It'll probably run till it has 400,000 or 500,000 miles on it. My daughter has my Jetta that has 300,000 miles on it. It's 20 years old. It can drink. It's of legal age to drink. All right. I mean, we perfected, for all intents and purposes, the internal combustion engine and automotive engineering 20 years ago. That Jetta's a 2003. Not a single internal component in the driveline has been touched. Not one. Engine, transmission, not a thing. Nothing wrong with it. I do all the maintenance on it. It's perfectly fine. She drives it every day. I thought she would have wrecked it by now. She learned how to drive on that car. But she hasn't. So, okay. Well, I mean, new driver, right? Fairly common that you smash one or two before you figure it out. She never did. But this is so. Why are we building trucks with 10-speed automatic transmissions in them that blow up before they got 50,000 miles on them? And GM now has something like 750,000 vehicles with 6.2-liter engines in them that like to chuck rods through the block. I mean, that kind of stuff's nuts. And the whole bottom line is that we have gone down this road of there's no cost-benefit analysis that goes into anything. 95% of the pollution reduction that could be potentially achieved in terms of transportation engines was figured out by roughly 2000. It costs nothing. We know how to do it. It's easy. You literally could sit outside and stick a hose on the back of my Mazda after it's warmed up, and you would have a hard time poisoning yourself with carbon monoxide from it. You might not even be able to kill yourself doing that. But this is where we are. And yet, we all want to talk about EVs. Oh, you got to have batteries. Well, they're stupid expensive, and there's no reason to do it. And we've got so many scams like this intertwined throughout the economy. I'm sitting in a bar tonight having a beer and a bite, and there's a group of people behind me, and they're all talking about shooting themselves full of Ozempic because a couple of them have diabetes and they're fat. Michael, you know what the answer to this is. You did it yourself. I did it myself 15 years ago. Did you stab yourself full of Ozempic?
No.
Neither did I. Are you fat?
No.
Are you diabetic?
No.
Well, neither am I. Okay. But for $1,000 a month, you too can stab yourself in the leg. Why? Where do we, Lutnick's right in that we have to force production back into the United States. He's right that tariffs are not inflationary. In fact, they're exactly neutral monetarily. It's mathematics. It's not a debatable point. Okay, facts just are, whether you like them or not. But where none of these people are hitting the point is all of these different industries, from mining to manufacturing to medicine,
Education.
Education, okay? Education's been screwed since I was in school. I could spend an hour on that. I won't, because it's very deeply personal. I forced a fix for myself. The key word there is force. By the way, the majority of the people that I knew that didn't do what I did, they're either seriously screwed today or they're dead. A large number of them are dead. We don't have the stomach as a nation to take this sort of thing on. Killing the Department of Education is the right move, because the Department of Education is largely responsible for this, but not entirely, but largely. A person who has a 100 IQ and is a teacher cannot realistically teach a student that has 125 IQ. They can't. They simply don't have the intellectual chops to be able to do it. It's not complicated, okay? But at the same time, if you have a class full of students, most of them are average, meaning 90 to 110, okay? There's a handful of 125s. The problem is there's a handful of 70s at the same time, in the same place. If you try to produce equal outcomes, the person who has a 70 IQ is never going to reach 100, no matter what you do. It's impossible. They simply don't have the firepower. So how do you make them equal? You listen to Rush?
I have in the past.
You familiar with the song The Trees?
No, I mean, I'm not, yeah.
The trees are all made equal by hatchet, axe, and saw. Is that what we want as a society? Don't we need the people that are 125, 150, 175? Don't we need those people to invent things, to make the society better? Can we really be okay as a country if we take everybody and we make the base 75 and we step on everyone that's above that in order to make everyone equal? Can we as a nation survive that? By the way, maybe if you think we can, and some people do, you might note that, in 1492, this little event happened here in this land that we have today, right? Somebody sailed a ship over here. For 1,000 years prior to that, everybody on the other side of that ocean looked out over the same water. Right? I mean, the Atlantic's the Atlantic, right? And some people looked out over that ocean and they dreamed that there was land on the other side. And some people did not. The first inspiration for engineering is to dream of that which you do not have any evidence for, and yet you think it might be there. The people who did not never built a boat, because they never had a reason to build a boat. They never had a reason to put their mind to the idea of doing it, because they never thought there was anything there. So why would they? But the people who did dream of it did build boats. And they built bigger and bigger boats until they built one that was big enough to be able to cross that ocean without killing everybody that was on board. We're not all the same. And the belief that every human is demonstrably false. Now, we can either deal with the reality of life, and we can promote it so that we do smart things, and we will fail. Some of those efforts will not succeed. In fact, most of them won't. Or we can step on every single person that has a dream. And I seem to remember this doctor that said he had a dream. And he wasn't a white guy. And we have done more in the last 40, 50 years to ruin that than to honor it. And we got to stop.
So, do you think overall then, you pointed out things you agreed with Lutnick, things you didn't agree with, the plan that appears that they're going for? I watched Bissent's interview. It was a couple days prior too.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know if anybody does. But what are your thoughts on what this plan is and if it will?
Well, it beats anything we've done in the last 30 years in our government. It's demonstrably better because it recognizes the reality of what other nations have done and what we've done in conspiracy with them. And I mean that, in that the United States has more military power and more ability to enforce its will than any other nation on the history of the planet, right? There's never been a country with the ability to enforce what it wants greater than the U.S. today. Never. And we can literally obliterate anybody that pisses us off sufficiently. Now, whether we should is a different question, but we certainly can. That's a relatively new power, by the way. You know, that's born of the nuclear age. But the real question becomes, how did we get here, and what are we going to do to prevent this? What are we going to do to reverse it? What Lutnick's talking about is forcing labor back into the United States, forcing production back into the United States by making arbitrage uneconomic. Now, I've preached this for a long, long time. And in fact, if you pick up a copy of Leverage and read it, you'll find that that is essentially the prescription from a foreign policy perspective. And I denoted them as wage and environmental parity tariffs. And that is the way I describe them. It's basically that you cannot allow a country to leverage the poisoning of the earth and the exploitation of human capital, labor. In other words, you can't allow people to essentially employ slaves. And because every nation is sovereign, that we don't have the right to force a country to do what we want, unless we're going to blow them up. If we eschew that as the path, I mean, Hitler seemed to think that the answer was to blow everybody up, right? Okay, let's not go there. That's bad, especially when a lot of people have nuclear weapons. So we're not going to blow people up. So what is the other option? The other option is you make it expensive. If you want to use slaves, the Uyghurs, for example, I think that's pronounced correctly.
Uyghurs.
Uyghurs, over in China, all right, religious minority that the government does not like very much, that they impress into forced labor. If the Chinese wish to do this, we could stop them physically by telling them to cut it out or we're going to blow them up. All right? But when you get down to foreign policy, that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, those are the options. You can say, well, stop this, and they put up the middle finger. Now what? Right? So the answer is fine. If you produce a product using forced labor, and that forced labor was 30 cents an hour, that's what it costs. Well, the minimum wage at the federal level in the United States is, what, $7.50? Whatever it is. Okay? All right. So we figure out how many hours of labor are in this thing that you wish to export to the United States, and that's the amount of the tariff. We take the difference between the two labor rates, and that's the amount of the tariff. And the person who wants to import it can either pay the tariff, or they can move the production to the United States and employ people in the US. And because transportation costs money, it is always cheaper to make the thing in the US if you do that. Always. And that solves the problem. We do the same thing for the environment. China leaches lithium in open pools. It's insanely environmentally destructive. We would never allow that to be done in the United States. Okay, that's love canal crap. We did that in the 1950s in the United States. We poisoned people, for crying out loud. And we decided as a country that it was not acceptable to poison people. When I was growing up, there was a chemical plant near my house. Every time I rode in the back of the car, my mom driving, in the back of it, your eyes watered, and you couldn't eat the fish in the river because the river was full of poisons. We decided that was unacceptable. We changed that. That very same river, I can see the bottom today in the same place where I grew up. I can drive past that plant. It's still there. I don't smell anything. We cleaned all that up. We said, this is not acceptable. You can't do this. You can't poison people to make, I mean, yes, we need the chemicals. We still need these things. But you're just going to have to spend whatever the money is to not do that. So we can figure out what that amount of money is, and that's the tariff. And if China wants to poison their land, it's their land. Let them do it. But if Tesla wants to buy lithium to make batteries, or buy batteries made in China, well, you know, the battery costs, you buy the Chinese one, there's a whole crap ton of them in there, in the pack. Say they're $5 a piece. Well, if you make them in the United States, they cost $9. So for every one of them you want to import from China, you're going to pay $4. Okay. And since it costs money to move them, where are you going to manufacture them? If you got to pay the same amount of money for them here in the United States or pay the same amount of money for them, you're going to make them here. That's not punitive. It's just recognition that we do not accept the arbitrage of either human capital or environmental destruction. We don't accept it, period. End of conversation. China is building 1,000 coal-fired power plants. We should be building 10,000. But we have a basic problem, and this is one of the other blind spots that Lutnick has. This goes all the way back to Carter. We originally had a nuclear power program in the United States that was corrupted in a sense in that we wanted it for dual use. We wanted to build bombs because we wanted nuclear weapons, but we also wanted nuclear energy, electricity. And the choice of technology that we used was largely driven by this dual use paradigm. I'm absolutely convinced of this. Nobody admits it. I've studied it at great depth. My next door neighbor when I was growing up was a physicist at one of the plants. That's what got me interested in it. And I'm absolutely convinced that's what happened. Okay? But then Carter comes along and decides, and he was not stupid. He was a trained nuclear engineer in the Navy. Okay, so he was extraordinarily intelligent and he knew exactly what he was doing. He concluded that civilians could not operate nuclear power in the United States safely, that we would all glow in the dark. That if we had nuclear energy for our main power source in the United States, we would screw it up and our cities would glow in the dark. Okay. And he knew that he couldn't stop that directly, but what he could do was shut off the reprocessing, which was necessary to close the fuel cycle and take care of the waste. And so that's what he did with an executive order. He shut it down. And the commercial entities that were building those plants saw billions of dollars of investment go up in smoke in a day. And there was nothing they could do about it. Ronald Reagan reversed that order on the first day in office. To this day, there is not a single commercial entity that has built a single fuel reprocessing plant for nuclear power in the United States. Not one. And they learned well. And we've got this problem today with all forms of energy and with all forms of other sorts of technological development, in that Donald Trump is president today, and he's just said, we're going to start using coal again. Right? You probably just heard this a couple of days ago. This actually is very smart, because coal is very inexpensive, and we know how to stop it from causing lung cancer in people. We can take the thorium out of it, which is what causes the lung cancer. Thorium is a heavy metal. It's very easily separated before you burn the coal. Thorium also happens to be a fertile material, which means it can be used as a nuclear fuel, so it's very valuable. So it's not like you're taking something out that you're going to throw away. You can actually use it. It's a valuable heavy metal. So we could do that. But the problem with this path is that Donald Trump in 3.5 years will not be president anymore. And his executive order can be reversed. And if I'm an industrial individual and I'm going to build a plant that is a 40-year lifetime, and I am borrowing the money to build it or taking it out of my operating cash flow with the expectation that I'm going to turn a profit for the next 40 years. And 3.5 years from now, Gavin Newsom is elected president of the United States. And he destroys my investment. There's nothing I can do. I'm not going to make that investment. And this is where Lutnick misses the point. Because if you're going to solve these problems, there has to be some way to guarantee that if I put some plant together that has a 40-year payback period, you can't fuck me for 40 years. Or I'm not going to build it. Because our government has done it repeatedly. The entire Green New Deal scam and all the things related to it, all the way back to Carter and nuclear energy. It's not a one-time event. So if you want private business, which is the driver of all innovation, because you do smart things, you make money, you do stupid things, you go broke. The government doesn't have that constraint.
Yeah, they have the blank check.
Well, not only that, they just steal more money from you. Okay, I mean, when was the last? I mean, look, we've had an education department since what, 1975? I think that was when it was formed. All right, have test scores improved in the years since?
Our society's getting worse and worse.
Well, it's getting worse and worse, and yet, if you did that as a business, if you made, look at, Disney makes Snow Woke, okay, or Snow Black, and it bombs, all right, because regardless of what they think, people don't want to buy it. They don't want to buy tickets. How many more of those movies will you make? Well, as many as you'd like, but every one of them loses money, and it's your money. Okay? You can't steal it from somebody else. The government can always come and steal it from you through taxation or by inflating, which does the same thing because it makes the price of your groceries go up. So Lutnick's blind spot is that he's always been a capitalist in a capitalist system. What he hasn't called for, and I don't know if he will, maybe he will. Leitzinger seems to, so, that's the trade rep, right? It's the guy that Trump appointed to do trade. Leitzinger seems to pretty much have it figured out in this regard when it comes to tariffs. And one of the things that Lutnick said was that, look, after World War II, we were the only country with an industrial base standing. Everybody else got blown up. Right? So, all those people over in France and England, whatever, they all got blown up. Fine. We're going to let you keep your tariffs and we're going to drop ours. Why? Because you don't have any factories. You have a pile of bricks. Okay. That was 70 years ago. When do we say, we let you do that, we're not doing it anymore? We let you do it on purpose because you really did need to rebuild your society. We're okay with that. But that was a long time ago. Why the hell should we keep doing that? The only reason we didn't get blown up in World War II was that nobody could get to us. There was an ocean in the way. Well, that's not true anymore. I mean, if there's a war now, we're all going to get blown up. So, the world changes. But that's an observation that he made, and he's right. That essentially the United States made a policy decision that we were going to let those tariffs stay in place for those nations, and we were going to drop ours. And essentially, we were going to run a trade deficit on purpose, and we were going to do it to help them, and that was the reason it happened. What's the excuse today? We're 70 years down the road.
So what was your overall, then at that point, it's kind of summarizing the whole conversation with him. And, you mentioned this is the best plan that they've had in over 30 years.
Yeah.
What do you think the success rate will be based upon, or the percentage that this could happen? That'll be successful. Because obviously this is where they're going with it, to me.
Well, yeah. And to the extent that the tariffs are not a game, that he's right, that Trump is not. So my problem with Trump is that in his first term, it was a stage show, fundamentally. Okay, it wasn't about actually solving the problem. It was about ego. It was about the polls. He even said himself several times that the referendum on his presidency was the stock market. Okay.
He was talking about that earlier today.
That's insane. Okay, I mean, that's insane. But that's what he did during his first term. I mean, that's history. Okay. Notice he hasn't said a word about that this time. There's been a change. Okay. What does it mean? I don't know. But Lutnick, to the extent that he and Leitzinger actually get the tariff environment under control for real, that's a serious net positive. That's good for the country. It's good for the American people. It will force a great deal of labor back here into the United States. It will force businesses back into the United States. On the spending side, so, that's the K thing, right? You got to do that. You can't only do one of them. Because otherwise what happens is, right, I don't want that. Nobody else does either. So if you see success, margins compress. That means asset prices come down a lot, not a little. And tariffs are part of that. But at the same time, you have to get the grift out of the system. And I've written a few columns on this, and I've talked about this recently a fair bit. Let's say that you have something that costs $1,000. It doesn't matter what it is. And through whatever mechanism, 20% gets added onto that because Guido shows up. Mafia, okay? Fraud. No matter how it happens, whether it's Guido personally or whatever. And 20% gets in that. And that's just pure, it's a pure scam. All right? Well, 20%, yeah, okay. Now, let's assume it's not Mr. Mafiosi. It's a business. Well, businesses are never happy with a flat revenue curve and a flat earnings curve, right? I mean, you look at the market. That's bad. And what is your PE ratio, your forward PE, if you have no growth in earnings? It's zero. Right? That's not good for your stock price. So you want to see that 20% get added every year, which makes that a compound function. It's an exponent. Once that happens, and that gets into the business cycle, in 5 years, 150% of the 1,000, so 1,500 extra dollars, gets siphoned off, and every bit of it is stolen. So now whatever it was that cost 1,000 costs 2,500, and only 1,000 of it is value. The rest is stolen. What do you think the number is in 10 years? What percentage, what amount of it do you think is stolen in 10 years? Just take a quick guess. By the way, this is really easy to do with a calculator, but I don't have one in my hands here.
I was trying to pull mine up really quick. 25%? I'm just throwing out a number.
500.
I wasn't even close.
5 times. By the way, medical care in the United States, when Medicare was put into force, was 4% of GDP. 4% of our economy was medical care. What is it today? 20.
And they haven't even talked about that yet either.
Well, if you don't fix that, okay, you have to fix it. You have to fix it everywhere that it is. Medical care just happens to be the worst, but it's not the only one. But you have to fix it. And if you don't, you fail. Because all exponential curves go vertical if you leave them alone, if you don't step on them. Every one of them mathematically goes vertical. Every single time. There are no exceptions. That's what happens every time. So this is a start. But as I pointed out when Trump was elected, you do this, there was a massive deflationary correction, asset prices crash, there is a very large and bad temporary downward movement in the economy as all this stuff comes back into the United States. If it happens right in front of the midterm elections, Trump loses both houses. Because everyone votes their wallet, and he won because of that reason. And he will lose both houses of Congress. And if he loses both houses of Congress, he gets impeached. And he gets absolutely nothing done for the last 2 years of his term. He won't get ejected because they won't lose enough seats in the Senate to vote him out of office. He's going to sit there with his finger in his butt for the last 2 years, and then the GOP is going to lose in 2028. I don't know who's going to be the president, but it won't be Vance. So he has to pull the rug out from under this thing, and he has to do it now. Because come in next summer, not this summer, but next summer, we have to be recovering. And if we are, he wins. He holds both houses. Why? Because everybody felt the pain. It was bad, but now it's better.
Do you think
it's getting better?
Do you think we're close to that pain though? Because we're not feeling it yet.
No, we're not doing any of it yet. But that's what I'm saying. He needs to. That's why I said this. He really does have like a March 31st deadline on starting to do things like issuing indictments against some of these people. There really is a timeline on this, because you cannot have this kind of a thing take place without, stock prices are going to go down a lot. House prices are going to go down a lot. Unemployment is going to go up temporarily a lot. Do you want that to happen next June? Not this June, next June, when there's an election in 3 months. No. Okay. I mean, do you want to have 10% unemployment in October of 2026? That's a disaster.
So you don't think he's doing enough right now in order to accelerate this, in your view?
I think he's.
What do you think of overall what he's done?
You know what? I had hoped that he had learned that you cannot solve this problem incrementally without taking the hit. You can't.
Meaning you can't slow death this with 1,000 cuts.
You have to take the hit. You have to take the damage. You have to force the fraud out of the system. There is no way to do that isn't going to result in economic damage. It is going to result in a lot of it. But you have to do that to rebalance the economy. And there isn't any way around this. It's been let go for too long. Back in 2000, when the tech crash happened, if we hadn't pumped the money supply then, and Bush with his zero interest, gee, buy a car, get zero interest for 3 years, da da da. By the way, I bought a truck when he did that because I needed a truck. If that hadn't happened, that would have helped. If in 2008, when the housing market blew up, if the answer had been, you made bad loans, swallow. Okay. Oh, you're bankrupt? That's nice. Okay. You're a big bank? You blew up? Well, sucks to be you. And people say, well, you couldn't do that. The entire bank is upset. No, it wouldn't. The bank on the corner goes out of business. You still need a bank, right? You need a place to put your paycheck. Somebody will open a new one tomorrow. And by the way, they'll buy the building for 10 cents on the dollar, it's called creative destruction, and it is fabulous. I did this when I ran my company a couple of times. I had other firms that, through no fault of mine, had nothing to do with me. They made stupid decisions, and they blew up. And as a result, in one case, I got office space at a fifth of the ordinary market rate for that kind of office space in that place. Why? Because the people who had it beforehand blew up, and the building needed to lease it right now because they had a lending covenant on the building, and they were in violation, and I had cash. And I happened to need the 8,300 square feet of office space because I was out where I was. I needed to add more people and more equipment, and I had nowhere to put another chair. Okay. And so I needed more space. Well, that opportunity came along and I jumped on it. That was over the space of 5 years, that was close to $250,000 I didn't have to spend. Where do you think that went? Well, that went straight into the cost of the services that I sold. That's not bad. I mean, it sucks if you're the guy that gets, that blows up. But why was I able to do the kinds of things that I did with my internet company? That was a big part of why. Would I have made anywhere near as much money and it been anywhere near as competitive if those things hadn't happened? No.
One last thing I want to ask you about, going back to Lutnick, because I want to get your take on it, is the sovereign wealth fund and what he was talking about with that. I'm wondering if you're about to say is what I feel with this stuff. Because, well, hold on, before you answer.
Okay.
I mean, the guy, if I had a used car sale, if I had a used lot, I'd want that guy. I'd want that guy. Wouldn't you hire him? I'd hire him in a heartbeat.
You know what?
That guy could sell some cars. I mean, he could.
Did you ever see the movie Used Cars?
No, I never did. No, but I saw the Cadillac Man. Cadillac Man, Robin Williams. That was a good one.
Yeah, you should. It's a cult. It's a cult favorite, and it's yeah.
But he to me, it's like, oh, we'll throw your clothes in the sovereign wealth fund. We'll throw. And I'm being sarcastic, but we'll throw it all in there. Here, take that hat. Take your hat, Karl. We'll throw that in there too. We'll throw.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of logic to what he's talking about. The logic is we have seized a bunch of digital assets from people who are doing very illegal things. Okay, Silk Road and crap like that, right? I mean, drug dealing, you may not think it should be a crime, but in the United States it is. So, international drug trafficking it's frowned upon, right? And so we seized those assets, and we have been very fortuitous as a country in that we seized them and then they appreciated dramatically in value from the time that we stole them. And we stole them through legal process. So you can say that we stole them, but on the other hand, forfeiture is a thing when you do something evil and you get caught, and, that's the way it works, right? So we have these assets. Now what are we going to do with them? Well, we could have immediately turned around and liquidated them and turned them into money, dollars. As it turns out, it's kind of like stealing somebody's stock certificates. If GE, okay, big industrial company, right? During the middle of the crash in 08, 09, I shorted a bunch of puts against GE. If you short a put, you are obligated to buy it if somebody puts it on you. And they will if it goes under the price at which you said you would buy it at. So if I short a $5 put and the price of the stock goes to $4, that person is going to put the stock on me because it's worth $4 and they can make me pay them $5. Okay. Needless to say, if that happens, they're going to put them on me, right? Because I have sold an obligation to take them if they desire to do it during that period of time. But that's not what happened in this case. All right. Now, the reason I shorted those puts is I didn't think GE was going out of business, and I thought the company was worth much more than $5. Now, as it turns out, but I might have to wait a while. Okay, that's fair. As it turns out, the stock never went below $5, and I never got assigned. So I just kept the premium that I got for selling them. But I got a phone call actually from the brokerage when I did it because they said, "Do you realize how large of a trade this is if you get hit?" And I said, yeah, I'm doing this on purpose. Okay, have a good day. You have the money. Have a good day. They were kind of freaked out at the size of it. So in this case, we confiscated these Bitcoins, and then they wildly went up in price, which was essentially exactly the trade I was trying to do. And if I'd been successful at it, if I'd been assigned, 2 years later, I would have made about $10 or $15 million doing this. Okay, it would have been hideously profitable. I probably would have bought a house in Aspen with that. But, as it turned out, that's not what happened. I still made money, but I didn't get a windfall. But the United States did get a windfall. Okay, it wasn't under their control, but it happened. And the same thing with this. I had no control over what was going to happen to GE's stock price. But now they have the windfall. But as long as it's sitting there as Bitcoin, it's numbers on a piece of paper. So what do you do there as a nation? Does it make sense to say, okay, this is a national asset? Yeah, I think it kind of does. And then if you say, well, and then the next crook that we catch with a bunch of cryptocurrency, that forfeiture is going to go in there too. I mean, we didn't pay anything for it. It was a forfeiture. Right? We didn't give the guy anything for it. We took it from him because he was convicted of a crime. We seized it. I'm okay with that as far as that goes. What I'm concerned about is that it creates a very perverse incentive for the United States to steal people's digital assets. When you think about it, if you can find, Bitcoin's what, 80 something now, right? Well, what if you can find me with, 1,000 Bitcoins and you contrive some bullshit reason to steal my 1,000 Bitcoins? That's a lot of money. We have a problem with that in the United States right now with civil forfeiture. We've had it for a long time. I'm concerned about the potential acceleration of that. I like the idea in the general sense. I'm concerned about it being perverted. So, how do we prevent it from being perverted? Because one of the things that has been said is that they're not going to make any open market purchases of these assets. So basically what they're going to use to fund it and expand it is seizures. Do I really want my government to have a reason to steal? I'm not so sure I like that. And I'm a little worried about it.
He also talked about state parks or federal parks.
Oh, yeah, there was another line of
Anwar, TikTok.
Mike, I'm really worried. He's a private market guy, okay? If Cantor owns a building, it's Cantor's. Who owns the national parks? Not the federal government. The federal government is essentially a conservator of national lands. They're not the owner. We are. You and I. He started talking about, what was it, $500 trillion worth of, of quote unquote assets in this area. The hair on the back of my neck stood up when he started going down that line of thought. The idea that the government is not a conservator of these things, but is the owner, I'll go to war over that. And he better think long and hard before he manages to get somebody to do it. And frankly, I think everybody in this country ought to be willing to go to war over that. For real. That stuff's not owned by the government, it's owned by all of us.
People don't realize that, though. I mean, I didn't realize it in the way you just put it.
Well, it's ours. It's not his. It's not the government's.
So he's talking like it's the federal government. We can do what we want with it. And we can throw these parks like Yosemite or Zion or
All of it. All the BLM land. All of the resources that happen to be under it. That wealth belongs to the citizens of this country. It doesn't belong to the government. It's not theirs. It's ours. How do you think we got it? Our forefathers died. We paid for it in blood. I'm willing to kill people over that. I hope he doesn't go there, for real. The hair on my neck stood up when I heard that part of what he was talking about. Because that is the kind of thing that comes out of Chairman Z. You can't take a private market approach to public resources. What Cantor Fitzgerald owns, they paid for. They bought it. The government does not buy anything with their own value. They buy it with the value of their citizens. They buy it with the blood of their citizens. It's not theirs. They're conservators. That is a completely different model. That is exactly, in fact, the government's model is the same model. Do you have any children?
no.
Okay, well, I have a daughter. When she was not yet of age, I put money into a fund in trust for her. It's not my money anymore. It's her money. I'm responsible to manage it, but it's not mine. If I steal it, I've committed a criminal offense. It's her money. I'm responsible to make sure it doesn't get purloined, but it's not mine. And the value of the land, this piece of firmament called the United States, does not belong to the government. It belongs to the citizens. It's theirs. Why do you think in Alaska, every person who lives in the state gets a check from the state government as demurrage, essentially, for the oil that's extracted from underneath Alaska? The oil doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to the people.
Lots to ponder today, Karl.
Yeah.
We just continue to follow this along, and it's an exciting time we're in right now. Scary, exciting, and turning.
I mean, like I said, you want to look at just from a market point of view. Everybody thinks of me as like a perma bear. I never look at things
I shouldn't say
positively.
scary because it is what it is. It's not scary.
Well,
But
it is what it is. But people look at me and they say, oh, Denninger's never positive about anything. Look, I right now, do I have a positive longer term view? No. But do I believe that things are going to kind of calm down here a little bit from a standpoint of the markets and probably go higher for the next month or two? Yeah. Yeah, I do. Do I think that's stupid? Yes. But whether I think it's stupid doesn't matter. The only thing that pays is price. That's it. Um, do I think this is a serious strategic mistake by the Trump administration? Yes. I think he and Lutnick and Leitzinger should pull the rug on this thing right now, because politically, the longer he lets this go, and especially if he tries to finesse it and thinks he can get away with it not blowing up at all, which I believe Trump does think, he's wrong. That's a recipe for a political disaster, and that's a huge mistake. And if he asked me for my counsel, my counsel would be, you take the hit right now. It's going to suck. I understand that. You're going to get the slings and the arrows, and everybody's going to shoot at you, and that. Fine. You have to do it now. You have to do it now simply because of timing and because in 2 years there's a midterm election, and you cannot change that. So you have to work with what you have. But that's not the path I see, and that's not the path the market sees. Because the market thought that was going to happen in the next 2 weeks, it wouldn't be stabilizing and moving upward here. And it is. So the market is saying that is what's going to occur. And that's a hell of a lot of people. I mean, that's everybody that trades every day. So, there you go.
where can people find you, Karl?
Market-ticker.org.
As always, I enjoy our conversations, and
Yeah.
you've become a regular on here, and I greatly appreciate it. And I know it won't be too long before we talk again.
No, hey, I knew you wanted to do this, so I made sure I had the camera in the bag. I came up here today. So.
I appreciate it, and
No worries.
and I know we'll talk soon.
You bet. Take care.
Mic drop.
All right, thanks.